Thank you, Waleed. That was a really helpful insight into this, exactly what happened to Shireen and the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. What's clear from our own investigation... Just grab your microphone at the end. Sorry. What's clear from our own investigation, as well as the detailed analysis that Waleed presented, is that, and I say it again, evidence in these cases is not the issue. We have evidence. There are so many cameras, thanks to the journalists that work in the area, thanks to the invention of the mobile telephone camera. There is so much live evidence about what happened. There is so much evidence about the perpetrators. There is so much evidence which compels you to suspect that what happened was a targeted killing in most, if not all, of these cases that we've investigated and presented already to the International Criminal Court. It's the political will that's lacking. It's the fact that Israel is gifted impunity. It's the fact that Israel is allowed to continue an asymmetric relationship with the Palestinian people without any accountability whatsoever. Fatou Bensouda, the former ICC prosecutor, took a historic step in dealing with the complaint from the Palestinian Authority in a noble way, in an honest way. She took the complaint and referred it to the pretrial chamber, and the pretrial chamber ruled, as I said in my opening, that the ICC has jurisdiction over these crimes since 2014 to the present day. Fatou Bensouda's investigation also concluded that crimes were continuing, and we've seen that in the last few days and weeks, that crimes are still continuing in that region. It's now in the hands of Karim Khan, who's the new ICC prosecutor. And we've seen how important the rule of law and accountability is with regards to Ukraine. When the international community and the ICC want to move, they can move enormously quickly and prevent further loss of life. We've seen already in the Ukraine war crimes prosecution supported by the international community. We've seen nothing with regards to journalists or any other civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories. The important question is, why is there this difference? What makes the situation different? Because the allegations are similar. The deaths are similar. The wrong is the same. I'd like to open the floor for some questions. We have some questions coming through on the platform as well, but I'll first of all ask anybody in the room if they have a question. If you could please put your hand up, I'll select you, introduce your organization and ask the question, and we'll decide who to answer that. Thank you. Please.
You said the evidence is not the issue, which is clear. You said the evidence is not the issue, which is make it clear. You have enough evidence, as you said, is recorded by the camera. So ICC, why doesn't make any move? Especially, we heard it's about 50 journalists killed since 2000 in Palestine.
I mean, this is I'll take this question. This is the point of our complaint, is that we see a prolonged system of attacks on journalists and civilians in the region. It's only actually very recently that the ICC has accepted that its jurisdiction covers the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. Even that's too long, actually. But we're hoping very much now. I mean, like I said, this is a real possibility for the ICC to open a historic chapter in this story and actually hold people in the region accountable for the international crimes that they commit. We know already that Israel can't do it, won't do it, refuses to do it, provides disinformation about the allegations. Even as recently as yesterday, Betty Gatz's explanation about an acceptance about what potentially has happened is covered in spin and disinformation and misinformation. And so it's important that any investigation that's done is done by an independent institution such as the International Criminal Court. From where I'm sitting today, I can see no reason why the ICC would not proceed with an investigation and potential prosecutions in these cases.
Can I add something here in this
Sure.
point? Sure. Because if there is no accountability and punishment at this time, Shireen will not be the last Palestinian journalist to be executed by the Israeli occupation. Then, because that we need the protection guarantees for Palestinians and Arab journalists, and at the same time, an international trial is essential through an international commission to guarantee this protection for and to accountability and punish the criminals who did that.
Thank you, Walid. Walid, we just have some limited time, so if I could just direct the questions, I'd be grateful.
Okay.
Thank you. Please.
So you mentioned that there were plenty of evidence to prosecute and to go to the ICC. ICC has no excuse not to investigate this and hold those accountable to justice. Are you, and you mentioned the political will. From who? And are you concerned that some of the members of the international community would get involved to suppress such a case?
Do you want me to answer that?
Well, it has been historically that whenever there are cases and journalist organizations have been, trying to get to the truth, that sometimes there are intervention from states. Only recently, in the case of Shireen, we had Boris Johnson already kind of interfering by even ahead of the ICC, making some comments that are not necessarily the position of the British government, but precisely to derail, what may be happening. That is how it could be interpreted. But I think at the end of the day, when we talk about evidence, it's not a case about one person or a particular person. It's the case of what's been happening over all these years. I mentioned James Miller. James Miller is our colleague. He's an English journalist. He was killed quite a while ago, and his parents, it was his parents, not the British government, who made a huge effort try to bring the people who killed him to justice. At the end of the day, it was the coroner in St. Pancras, just down the road, who took up the case, and they declared after a lot of hearing, and maybe not the kind of sophisticated evidence that we've got now, that he was directly shot by Israeli journalists, and the British government didn't lift a finger.
You said Israeli journalists rather than Israeli.
No, sorry. Yeah. So there have been cases. I will just come back to the point that Jennifer made about other journalists that haven't got a big organization behind them. There are dozens. I mean, if you look at the evidence that the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate gather, the vast majority of these people, they're normal journalists. They haven't got an organization behind them. They're photographers. They're camera crews. So when it happened to them, they haven't got the strength. They haven't got the political strength, in order kind of to pursue it. Yes, we can focus on one person that's emblematic, and that is good. If you manage, to get it to the court, there is the question about all the others. Among the 4 people that we have taken up, none of them have got an international organization behind them, to push their case and to agitate among kind of big government, to try to say enough is enough and the case should be taken up.
Okay. I just want to add to that, if a politician, you asked if the international community might interfere in this, if a politician or any other person interferes in the UK, for example, with an investigation by a law enforcement authority, there's a set of words used to describe that, and it's a crime called perverting the course of justice, which is imprisonable. And as our group, we'll be looking very carefully at individual politicians that might seek to interfere with the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction and investigations, and to look at very carefully if action can be brought against those individuals as well. Just go to the side there.
My name is Musa. I have one question with 3 parts. First is, can you tell us about the time scale for the investigation and the hearing? And also about the perpetrator or the suspicious perpetrators. Does that include senior commanders of the Israeli army or senior politicians? And thirdly, all of us know that the Israeli careless about the international law. I mean, does that case will deter Israel to assault more Palestinian or more journalists, Palestinian journalists?
Thank you. Jennifer, if you'd like to take that.
Thank you for your question. First on timeline, we will be updating our ICC complaint as soon as possible. We've started gathering the evidence that has very helpfully been put together by various media organisations and from our colleagues on the ground, the PGS. Once that information is submitted, we'll continue to do advocacy to the ICC prosecutor to take the case up and open an investigation. And if there is a future prosecution, and we hope there will be, we will be seeking to formally represent our clients in that prosecution as their victim representatives in any future hearing. But the timelines are so far at this point unclear, but we will be pressing hard for it to move ahead as quickly as possible. As to the identity of the perpetrators, that will be an ongoing matter for investigation.
Any other questions? Gentleman here.
Sam Gawish from Untold Stories podcast. Question to Jennifer and type: is the ICC prosecutor obliged to open this investigation after your submission or not? And my question to Walid, in view of Al Jazeera decision to take the Shireen's file to ICC, do you expect more obstacles and put against your journalistic work and coverage in Palestine by the Israeli occupation authorities? Thank you.
Jennifer, you could ask the ICC question first.
Sure. With respect to the ICC prosecutor, he has a discretion to open the investigation, and we say that he ought to exercise that discretion on the grounds that this is a widespread and systematic problem. We've heard from Jim about how many Palestinian journalists have been killed in the past decade, let alone this year, let alone last year, and that these cases are emblematic of the broader problem. So it would be right and proper for the prosecutor to open the investigation, and important that he does.
Wally, do you expect
Yeah, we
difficulties?
difficulties we have all the time, and we expect even escalation in that. But the heavy price we paid, and we will continue doing our job.
Just at the back, gentleman there. Yes, you.
Nadeem Barber from Al Jazeera. A question for Tayyab, really. How hopeful are you that the ICC can, down the line, achieve any kind of justice for Shireen and other Palestinian journalists, given the fact that Israel is not party to the ICC and given its track record of non-investigation?
I mean, I have to be as confident as the pre-trial chamber ruling, and the pre-trial chamber ruling is very clear. The ICC's jurisdiction, criminal jurisdiction, extends over the territories that we're speaking about. That means that the ICC prosecutor can issue a warrant for the arrest of perpetrators, if the action or the crime took place in that territory under its jurisdiction. And then that has severe consequences for the individual perpetrator, whether they're inside Israel or not. You may well be aware that many countries have reciprocal legislation. So, for example, the United Kingdom has legislation which means that it's also obliged to prosecute people under the Rome Statute in our jurisdiction, and also in some circumstances hand people over to the ICC where a prosecution is likely to happen. Now, I don't see any reason why, if the rules are applied and they're not interfered with, why perpetrators from Israel will not be prosecuted. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time. That concludes our press conference. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for stopping you. No, you didn't.